pleasure to have you here. We're very happy that you address us and give a report about your country and political environment. As you know, first we have your lecture, later we have a discussion. Again, you are welcome, and the floor is yours.
Secretary General Dr. Harold Kinderman, Ambassador Peter Ruger, members of the Board of the German Council on Foreign Relations, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like firstly to take this opportunity to thank you, Secretary General Kinderman, for so graciously hosting me here today at the prestigious German Council on Foreign Relations. I have heard so much about your work as the premier network for foreign policy in Germany for well over 60 years. To be here at your institute on my first official visit to your great country as Foreign Minister of Sri Lanka is indeed an honor, and I have been overwhelmed by the warmth with which I have been received since my arrival last Wednesday. My topic today, ladies and gentlemen, or the topic which has been assigned to me, is contours of a new Sri Lanka. As you are aware, Sri Lanka is an ancient land with a recorded history dating back thousands of years, a land where a rich civilization thrived, steeped in tradition and culture, an island located midway between east and west in the ancient sea routes known to many and featured prominently in many an Asian map. In fact, Germany's own links with Sri Lanka dates back to many, many centuries. As early as the 8th century, the Archbishop Harbinus Maurus of Mainz wrote about an island called Taprobane that abounded in precious stones and elephants. And also in the introduction to his book, Germans in Dutch Ceylon, Major Ravenhart wrote that all the really vital accounts of lives in Dutch Ceylon were written by Germans serving in the Dutch forces of that time. The German zoologist Ernest Haeckel, recounting his visit to Sri Lanka in 1881, called it the Island of Marvels, and Freudenberg and Company, initiated by Philip Freudenberg, was a major name on Sri Lanka's economic horizon during the time of World War I. Freudenberg was appointed a consul in Ceylon at the time, and even today, the Freudenberg Company remains a household name in our country. Professor Wilhelm Giger, whose son is famous for having invented the Giger scale, was well known for his contribution to unraveling Sri Lanka's past and for the scientific study of the Sinhala language. His translation of Sri Lanka's ancient chronicle, the Mahavamsa, is still regarded as the most authentic translation of that monumental work. Also, another prominent German who figures in Sri Lanka's history is Madame Marie Mucius Higgins, a German Buddhist and educationist who founded a leading educational institute for girls in Sri Lanka well over a century ago. The school is named after her and even today remains one of the leading girls' schools of Sri Lanka. Despite such an impressive history uh, ladies and gentlemen. Today we speak of a new Sri Lanka in the context of the changes ushered in after the presidential elections in Sri Lanka on the 8th of January this year. As you all know, on the 19th May 2009 saw the end of 3 decades of violence unleashed by terrorism in my country. In the immediate years that followed, we failed as a nation to achieve meaningful reconciliation. In fact, the government of the then president used the war victory to create a dynasty for himself, and in an act very similar to the Enabling Act here in Germany of 1933, he put together a 2/3 majority through force, through blackmail, and through all kinds of other methods, and declared himself more or less president for life. The past 6 years or so since May 2009 saw Sri Lanka take, after that, an unfortunate journey on an autocratic path. Civil liberties were curtailed, independence of institutions, including the judiciary, was compromised, the democracy, one of the oldest in Asia, was weakened, the rule of law was undermined, and good governance practices and human rights were violated with impunity. In the words of President Maithripala Sirisena, who addressed the nation last Wednesday on the 6th anniversary of the end of the conflict, I quote, "Though the government at the time achieved some success on infrastructural development since May 2009, the nation failed to mend the broken hearts and minds of our people who suffered due to the prolonged conflict. We failed to address the causes of conflict in a manner that would guarantee durable peace, meaningful reconciliation, and non-recurrence. Divisions in society were become deeper along religious and ethnic lines. Freedom of speech and expression were curtailed, and fear and intimidation prevailed and pervaded in our society. Our nation, which had been a prominent and respected member of the international community since independence, including in the United Nations for long years, abandoned her natural foreign policy of engagement and chose instead to follow a policy of antagonizing traditional friends and partners, and isolated itself from the international community, especially in the 5 years since the war was concluded. It was in the backdrop of a sense of total despair that several parties in opposition, which I like to call the Rainbow Coalition, joined forces in November of last year. We came together to field a common opposition candidate, Mr. Maithripala Sirisena, then the General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, at the presidential election in January 2015, in response to the call by a large section of people in Sri Lanka who were yearning for change. Despite an election campaign which was deeply flawed and one-sided, the Rainbow Coalition of the opposition scored a decisive victory on the 8th of January on a platform promising far-reaching democratic and constitutional reforms. Asia's oldest democracy, in fact, reasserted its commitment to democracy by dislodging what I would call an emerging dictatorship in typical South Asian style, laid back and non-violent, instead of the stones, pellets and bullets of the Arab Spring. Sri Lanka's Rainbow Revolution succeeded through the power of the ballot. Over 81% of the registered voters exercised their franchise which I believe is a record since Sri Lanka gained independence in 1948. And silently, peacefully and decisively, they came out, resulting in a swift transfer of power the very next day, despite attempts even at the last minute to declare emergency and to make the results of the elections null and void. Ladies and gentlemen, this change which we saw happening in the last 3 months on the 8th of January brought with it great responsibility that the government must live up to. President Maithripala Sirisena, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, and the government are deeply conscious of this fact. For the first time in our nation's history, the two main political parties, the UNP, the United National Party, and the SLFP, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, have reached consensus to move forward in unison for a common cause. That is to work towards achieving important national objectives in keeping with the aspirations of the people of our nation. In fact, President Sirisena and the government are committed to building a nation where diversity, openness, tolerance and acceptance of others and their differences are cherished and celebrated, and in the development of the nation, no individual and no community can be left behind. The contours of a new Sri Lanka will be based on the vision of a nation that is reconciled, democratic and prosperous, with a united and entrepreneurial people at peace with themselves and at peace with the world. A nation that works in engagement and in cooperation with the international community and international organizations to address issues of concern not only for Sri Lanka but for the region and the global community as a whole. On the 6th anniversary of the conclusion of the conflict earlier this week, held in my own constituency in the southern province of Matara, the President emphasized that development and reconciliation are the government's main objectives and that this should be the priority and underlying theme that must inspire the people of Sri Lanka, including the security forces, in carrying out their duties and responsibilities towards the nation in their day-to-day efforts in the future. He emphasized that the reconciliation process would primarily need to include truth-seeking, justice, eliminating fear and suspicion, building trust among the communities, as well as rebuilding destroyed physical infrastructure. In the future, this day will be used to reflect on the causes of suffering and will commemorate the suffering of all. The emphasis on the twin objectives of reconciliation and development on the 6th anniversary of the conclusion of the conflict closely follows the adoption of the Declaration of Peace by the government earlier this year on Independence Day, on the 4th of February, where the nation paid respects to all who lost their lives to violence and pledged to never allow our land to be traumatized again by the shedding of blood of our own citizens. In a clear departure from the triumphalist approach adopted in the past, the people of Sri Lanka this year finally had their freedom to breathe, freedom to grieve, the freedom to mourn restored. They were free to reflect and remember those whose lives were lost or marred by violence. The fact that there are no victors in conflict is something that is well understood by the government and the people of Sri Lanka today. The toll that violence unleashes is not a price future generations of our nation deserve. Every possible step, therefore, will be taken by this government to ensure non-recurrence. We also learn from Germany's example and look to suffering of the past years as an exhortation to humility and moral honesty. While meaningful reconciliation would take time, as it involves a process of healing, it is nevertheless an essential factor for the country's progress. Recognizing this, the government, within days of assuming office, appointed two very senior former civil servants as governors in the former conflict-affected provinces in the north and the east, with a view to initiating measures to strengthen civilian administration. These posts were previously held, as you know, by military personnel. Along with this step commenced a series of additional measures to address the particular requirements and grievances of the people in these areas. This includes seeking tangible solutions to the complicated issue of land ownership. The high security zone in the northern province is being progressively reviewed, and land is now in the process of being returned to the people. 430 acres of land was released on the 23rd of March and 570 acres on the 10th of April, while a gazette notification was issued releasing a further 818 acres in the eastern province. A restraining order was issued by the Supreme Court on the release of this land. I'm told that this has now been lifted, which will allow the release of this land to proceed without further delay. Also, the restrictions placed on persons visiting the north were lifted with immediate effect when the government came into power, and today all journalists from all parts of the world are free to visit Sri Lanka anytime and to go to any part of the country without hindered or obstructed by the armed forces or any other authority. And also involvement of the military in civilian activities has ceased, and they have been asked to confine themselves only to their military duties if those are needed. Resettlement-related issues of the internally displaced are also being addressed in consultation with the relevant entities, including the UNHCR. The government is also working with the UN country team and the UN Secretary General to obtain assistance, including technical expertise, through the UN Peacebuilding Fund for Reconciliation, and all Sri Lankan refugees living overseas have also been invited to return on a voluntary basis, and some have already begun returning from southern India. Carrying out our pledge to ensure media freedom, as I said earlier, all restrictions on media personnel, including the practice of referring visas for clearance to the Ministry of Defence, were immediately discontinued. All foreign media personnel who wish to visit Sri Lanka are now welcome to do so and to travel to and report from any part of the country freely and without any intimidation. All news websites, the social media websites, which were blocked during the previous era, have all been unblocked within a matter of days, and we have already extended an open invitation to some of our media personnel living as political exiles in other countries to come back to Sri Lanka as soon as possible. In fact, some of them have already accepted our invitation and have returned. The adoption, ladies and gentlemen, of the 19th Amendment by near unanimity, with only one member of Parliament voting against, was also a remarkable victory for the people of our country. The passage of this amendment was a remarkable victory for democracy, and it is our hope that this significant step, which saw the opposition and government MPs work together, would be a model and turning point of our political history. It is our firm belief that the two main parties will continue to work together in Parliament even after the general elections, which is due very soon, most probably by the 15th of June. We are hoping that the parliament will be dissolved and a new parliament, as the president announced 2 days ago, will be in place before September of this year. And of course, within the contours of a new Sri Lanka, ladies and gentlemen, foreign policy will also have a prominent role. After all, for much of our thousands of years of recorded history, Sri Lanka has been a country that interacted actively with the world outside. As an island nation, the people of our country have always welcomed visitors. There are many records of visitors being overwhelmed by the warmth with which people in Sri Lanka have welcomed them. In the framing and pursuit of foreign policy, we will be guided by what best serves the interests of our people and not by any ideological fantasies. We are determined to restore our nation's image as a responsible member of the international community. And for much of Sri Lanka's history since independence, Sri Lanka was considered to be an important member of the international community, including the United Nations. The last few years saw Sri Lanka drift from this traditional position of engagement, not only with the UN, but with the entire international community. Sri Lanka strayed from our traditional position of engagement and consensus builder to confrontation, non-engagement and intransigence. This, I believe, was an aberration. We recognize the importance of the UN and multilateral agencies as vehicles for international discourse and norm setting for the common good. Since assuming office, President Sirisena undertook his first state visit to India, our closest neighbor with whom the people of our country share civilizational ties. He, of course, visited China and Pakistan as well and participated in the Commonwealth Day celebrations in London as chair in office of the Commonwealth. Having had the honor of receiving His Holiness the Pope within days of being elected, President Sirisena's government has been privileged in receiving several foreign dignitaries during the last few months. Prime Minister Modi visited Sri Lanka in March, making the first substantive bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 28 years. The Prime Minister of Bhutan, the Emir of Qatar, several foreign ministers, including the US Secretary of State, the first, I believe, in 43 years, visited Sri Lanka during this 100-day period. And we are extremely appreciative of this support that the government has been receiving from the international community. In fact, we are also continuing our dialogue with the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We appreciate the understanding shown by the international community in February by allowing the government time until September, until the 30th session, in fact, to carry out consultative processes and take steps to address the setting up of a necessary, independent, credible domestic mechanism to deal with issues pertaining to missing persons and accountability. And I'm happy to say that we now are in the process of actually working out the details of such a mechanism, and we will be discussing further this mechanism and the kind of technical assistance we will be needing with the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, whom I'm hoping to meet very soon. And of course, the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion of truth, justice, reparation and guarantees of non-recurrence visited Sri Lanka in late March this year. And we will also be receiving the working group on enforced disappearances, enforced and involuntary disappearances in early August. And it is also our hope that the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Prince Zay, would also be able to visit Sri Lanka before September this year. At the highest levels of government, deliberations are taking place on the best means to deal with missing persons and accountability issues. The government recognizes the importance of these processes to achieve meaningful reconciliation. The government's intention is to work with the ICRC in establishing a mechanism that addresses the concerns pertaining to missing persons. In fact, the South African government very generously shared with us their experience in truth and reconciliation in February, and we will continue to work with South Africa as well as other partners in formulating a mechanism to deal with issues of reconciliation and accountability that, of course, would suit the special requirements of Sri Lanka and her peoples. Sri Lankan soldiers also recently participated actively in earthquake relief effort in Nepal, and they are expected to continue to assist in projects that the government of Sri Lanka intends to undertake in rebuilding Nepal in the future. And I have also had discussions with the United Nations, the Secretary General, and also Samantha Power about the possibility of having a larger contingent of Sri Lankan soldiers in the peacekeeping efforts throughout the world. And as they disengage from commercial and civilian activity, these I hope will contribute them and perhaps rectify the image which has been acquired over the years. Although the government has achieved much during the last 4 months, ensuring that the contours that I set out are translated into lasting reality, of course, is no easy task. I admit that it is a challenging task. Another pillar of the new government's foreign policy is engaging with the Sri Lankan diaspora. Per capita, Sri Lanka probably has one of the largest diaspora in the world, and it is also one of the most illustrious diaspora communities. But to our loss, they have not featured prominently in our foreign policy making. And as a country, we have done little to harness their capital, relationships, and knowledge for our development. As a first step, we are hoping to have a festival for the diaspora in Colombo towards the end of the year. And we have already started discussions with various diaspora groups in different parts of the world on how they could contribute positively and actively to the development efforts of Sri Lanka and in building the contours of a new Sri Lanka. The celebration of this diaspora, I hope, will bring talented members of the diaspora from all walks of life, artists, scholars, business people, just a few examples, residing across the world to assist in Sri Lanka's reconciliation and developmental efforts. A lower middle income country, ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka is striving to reach upper middle income status. Our key challenges include increasing investment, including in human capital, realigning public spending, enhancing the role of the private sector, increasing exports and productivity, and ensuring inclusive growth while achieving sustainable development. Economic growth in our country has been among the fastest in South Asia. Yet due to the policies that were adopted in the last 8 years or so, proper procedures were not followed, and some statistics, unfortunately, are somewhat suspect. Human development indicators in the country are impressive by regional and lower middle income standards. Sri Lanka has surpassed most of the Millennium Development Goal targets set for 2015, yet considerable challenges remain in terms of dealing with an aging population, poverty in certain districts, including in the conflict-affected areas, addressing unemployment issues, affecting structural reforms including public sector reform, increasing public-private partnership, and increasing competitiveness. So as you see, the contours of the new Sri Lanka are not without challenges, yet the government is willing to deal with these issues and remains committed to the important and historic journey that it undertook on the 8th of January to ensure the realization of the aspirations of all the people of our country. This, of course, is not a task we can achieve on our own. We need the support of the international community, especially to ensure that the gains that we have made in the last few months are not lost but built upon and strengthened further. We need the world's democracies to stand with us and support us to ensure that the people of our country do not become discouraged and fall prey to autocratic or racist forces while we travel along this journey to a new Sri Lanka. We need to demonstrate to our people that reconciliation, peace, rule of law and good governance are essential features for sustainable development, progress and prosperity. And the peace dividend must be felt by all sections of our society. Support for Sri Lanka in this endeavour also means understanding that certain processes take time and must be approached with due appreciation of the sensitivities involved, which if disregarded could endanger the journey that we have embarked upon. Further to my discussions today, ladies and gentlemen, with the Foreign Minister and other senior officials of this government, I am pleased to say that we are exploring a new chapter in relations between Sri Lanka and Germany that will help cement our strong ties. Through the twinning of Lankan and German cities, we hope to establish people-to-people contact that will help expand our already multifaceted relationship. In particular, we look forward to the exchange of knowledge, best practices and experiences in all areas of our public life, including governance, economic development, technology and education. The new Sri Lanka's economic policies have also been calibrated to serve the interests of our people. Post-war growth was unsustainably propelled by consumption and construction. Our policy is to create sustainable growth by unlocking Sri Lanka's long untapped economic potential through foreign direct investment, trade and tourism. Sri Lanka has long been a paradise for German tourists. More than 100,000 people every year come to Sri Lanka from your country. But now we also want to make Sri Lanka a paradise for German investors. With relatively well-developed infrastructure and human capital, our immediate priority is to reset the investment climate by making Sri Lanka the most secure, efficient and competitive investment destination in South Asia. As noted above, we have re-established the independence of the judiciary and we are in the process of creating a rule-based investor climate where all companies will enjoy a level playing field. Merit and merit alone will be the sole criterion of success in the new Sri Lanka. Second, we are also making our economy more efficient through smarter regulations. We collaborating with industry, academia and our international partners to make rapid progress on the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index. Efficiency will also be improved through the reviving of a one-stop investment shop. And thirdly, Sri Lanka is a gateway to India, Pakistan and the broader Indian Ocean region. We have successfully signed free trade agreements both with India and Pakistan, and we are currently trying to upgrade the free trade agreement with India to a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. We are also currently in the third round of negotiations to sign a free trade agreement with China, and discussions with the United States for further trade access is also underway. As I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, over 100,000 German tourists visit us each year, and as we embrace the world again, we hope that this number will increase. But we are also putting things right at home. Sri Lanka climbed 11 places in the Tourism Competitiveness Index this year, and we hope to build on that success in the coming years, and resorts in the previous war-ridden eastern province, where many of Sri Lanka's finest beaches are found, and these hotels and these resorts have been opened recently. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the German model of social market economy is something Sri Lanka can learn from. The space and opportunities for us to work together and cooperate have now expanded. In the ambitious yet essential journey that we have undertaken to ensure durable peace and prosperity for our people, we require your assistance, your help more than ever before. And we trust that the government and people of this country who have been working with Sri Lanka for very long years will continue to stand by us and intensify support for us in this important journey towards a new Sri Lanka. Thank you again, thank you very much for your overwhelming welcome to your country, and especially I must thank the Foreign Ministry and the Foreign Minister for the gracious welcome, and also the Secretary General again. A big thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the members of this distinguished institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for this inspiring lecture. Well, we will have now a discussion, please.
The government who presented a list of old friends and some lost allies who welcomed the incoming government, and you forgot to mention the Russian president who hailed the democratic standards of the election, and there he is an expert. One thing is very important, and you took the initiative that the reconciliation process between the major ethnic groups must restart it urgently in order to gain confidence in your politics, and also the dialogue with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva, as you mentioned, is important. When it comes to Germany, I had the opportunity to talk to a number of people from the economy who are very interested in the potential of your country, but who have some points, some questions, some concerns with regard to the immediate future of the country. One point is the stability of your government. The government now is being composed of a coalition of, let's say, bitter rivals for decades. So what will the future bring in view of the upcoming election, maybe in September or even earlier? How can you outline what the next government, how the next government will be formed, and how you maybe also can integrate other ethnic groups like the TNA or others? The split in between the SLSP is a matter of concern. So who will this party continue to exist, in which form? And the other 2 points for the German economy are that apparently there is a bit of a, let's say, a feeling that for a while the country became the private property of of a family. You know, that has to end, and that means the re-establishment of the rule of law and the fight for corruption should be a priority of the new government in order to turn challenges into opportunities, and there the German economy definitely will be prepared to support your government. And allow me one personal remark. When my close friend Mohamed Nasheed came into power in 2008 in the Maldives, he was so proud and naive to believe that his predecessor promised to abstain from politics. And you know what happened now. So the time is now to turn Sri Lanka into something, you know, which the whole world will applaud. Thank you.
Chair. Thank you, members. I think as an ambassador and as a person who was flying the German flag in Sri Lanka at a very difficult period of our history, I'm very happy about some of your comments, and also I'd like to basically answer your question about the stability of the government. In fact, as I mentioned a little while ago, the President has already assured the public that he will meet the campaign promise to dissolve the Parliament as soon as the 19th Amendment to the Constitution has been passed and his powers have been trimmed and pruned. So in keeping with that promise, even 2 days ago, he made a statement, a public statement that a new Parliament will be in place before September. And I believe that the dissolution of Parliament will take place within the next 2 or 3 weeks in order to meet that deadline. But of course, the general election is a unique experiment for us in Sri Lanka because, as you said, the two parties which have been traditional rivals ever since these parties were formed way back in the 50s, have today agreed and have an agreement to say that they will come together again after the general elections in order to form a government of national unity, or as you have here, a grand coalition. The United National Party and the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, led by Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe respectively, have agreed to this formula, and I know that the two leaders are already in the process of speaking to some of the smaller parties, especially the TNA and the party which represents the Tamil people in the north, have already been invited to join after the elections. The Muslim Congress, which represents the Muslim community of the Eastern Province, have also been asked to join, and even some of the more left-oriented smaller parties have also been invited, and the discussion for a national unity government is very much underway because we feel that such a grand coalition is needed to ensure that some of the far-reaching democratic reforms we have done and we are also hoping to do under the new parliament needs consensus building between the two main parties. We have also agreed that the new parliament will be a constituent assembly which will draw up a new constitution for Sri Lanka, because many people feel that the two previous republican constitutions in Sri Lanka have not been able to meet the grievances and challenges of the other communities in Sri Lanka, and has not been able to celebrate the diversity of the cultural, religious and ethnic diversity of the people in Sri Lanka. So a new constitution will also be very much in the cards under the new parliament, and of course the unknown factor is how much and how much influence Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa and his group of extreme Sinhala nationalists will have in the forthcoming elections. But we are confident with the two main parties coming together, we should be able to garner even a 2/3 majority, which would be needed to see through a new constitution.
Thank you. My name is Gerd Kurz. I work for Global Public Policy Institute, an independent think tank here in Berlin. Your Excellency, very impressive what your government has already achieved, of course. So I wish you to have that in mind when I ask my core questions. First of all, you already mentioned Sinhalese extremists. How are you dealing with the BBS and in last year has shown quite some concerning riots against Muslims by radical Buddhists. How are you addressing that problem? And then secondly, probably one of the most important issues when it comes to Sri Lanka's relations with the international community is, of course, the accountability that you already mentioned. And your government has, of course, promised to create this accountability mechanism. Maybe you could shed more light on what that will entail. I recently saw that it's only supposed to last for a few months, until September. Is that correct or not? Maybe you can shed more light how that will go about, whom it will meet, and how it will relate to the LLRC, and so on. That would be very much. Thank you.
As for your first question on how we would deal with the extreme organizations like BBS and Sinhala Rave, I would say isolation, and we just ignore them. That is the best way to deal with them, because they were a creation of the last government. They were pumped money from the Defense Ministry. The police were asked to basically not act when they went on the rampage against certain minority groups, as you said. But unlike them, we have basically been very, very firm whenever they try to create problems, so to speak. And as a result, we have not heard very much of them in the last 3 or 4 months, and we are hoping that they will finally disappear and be confined to the dustbin of history, where they, I think, belong. So that's it. As for the accountability process, no, there was never any statement saying it is only a temporary or a short mechanism. In fact, you have misread what was written. What we have said is the mechanism will be set up before September. Yeah. In fact, when I had discussions with High Commissioner Zaid in Geneva about the possible postponement of the OISL report, which was due to be tabled last March, we finally agreed on the postponement on the basis that Sri Lanka will have this domestic mechanism in place before the 30th sessions begin next September. And we have already begun working out, we have been looking at different options, but we are keen to come up with something which is peculiarly Sri Lankan, even though I mentioned about the South African involvement in working out a TRC, a Truth Reconciliation Commission, That certainly won't be of the South African model, because we believe this whole concept of confession and forgiveness is not really very much a part of our culture. But we feel that they are parallelly to the domain mechanism which will give justice to those who have suffered. We feel that there ought to be a truth reconciliation commission to heal those who have suffered during the war. And we are also looking at the model which is being pursued by Tunisia at the moment. They have what is called the Truth and Dignity Commission. And it is sort of, it works, certain cases are basically sent for healing purposes, and others are, they decide on what should be there for what, who and what needs to be prosecuted and dealt with legally. So there are 2 or 3 options, and as I said, I'm meeting the High Commissioner Zaid actually very, very soon, in the next week or so, to look at the different options, and we will be working with them and using their technical expertise in order to ensure that this mechanism will be something which is credible and acceptable to all the stakeholders.
My name is Maxim Sredutsev, Your Excellency. How do you see the bilateral relations with China and Russia?
Our bilateral relations with China remains in good shape. Of course, as you know, during the previous administration, the Chinese influence became a predominant factor in Sri Lankan foreign policy, but since we have taken over, we have been trying to reintroduce a more balanced foreign policy. And as I have said several times, our foreign policy has now moved back to the center and not a zero-sum game as it was before. But of course, there have been certain projects by China which is basically under review. Of course, not because they are Chinese, but because many of those large-scale projects we feel have not followed the proper procedures of our country. For example, the fourth city, which was initiated by the Chinese president when he visited Sri Lanka in 2014, has, due to no fault of the Chinese government or the president, has not even followed, has not even done a proper environmental assessment in fact. So as a result, the new government has appointed several committees to look into this, look into some of these projects, and we will be deciding on whether we are to proceed with them or not soon as the reports are out. But meanwhile, in fact, I have been to Beijing twice within the last 3 months, so has President Sirisena. But all in all, we want a foreign policy which basically would embrace the whole world, and we don't want to have a foreign policy which will deal with one country at the cost of another. And that is why we have been, in fact, my second trip after having become foreign minister, first was to India and then to Brussels, because we feel the EU has a very important role to play in Sri Lanka's future. And then, of course, we have also revived our friendship with the United States. And now, by coming here, we hope that we have also further strengthened the excellent relationship we have been having with your country over the years.
Well, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Therefore, I have to thank you for the inspiring lecture and your readiness to answer questions. You're very open. And we wish you that you will continue your visit successfully and come to a good end. We are very happy to hear and listen to your country and Sri Lanka. Reconciliation in this terrible world is always a model, and it's always worth to look how one can get reconciliation, and therefore this is a matter international.